Hey, Educator Barnes here, and this is another installment of Black with Kids. And an encounter I had last week made me think about the fact that even in 2018, Black parents are still hoping that their child someday will have a Black educator as their teacher. And so let me tell you about the incident that made me think about this. So, one of the duties I have at my school is car rider duty. And one of our teachers just recently had a baby, so she has to substitute. And so I was standing outside next to this Black substitute teacher, and she says to me, you know, when I went to school, I had to walk to school. I didn't have the luxury of being brought to school in the car. And I said, well, I wish I could have walked to school, but I was part of the desegregation busing. And so I was bused out for Indianapolis Public Schools to the townships. And so she looks at me and says, well, which township was you bused to? And I said, Lawrence Township. And she said, really? What schools? So I said, Mary Castle, Craig Middle School, and I'm super excited that my middle school is open again this school year, and Lawrence North High School. And she said, well, I'm a retired teacher, but I used to teach at Mary Castle. And so I'm looking at her, and I looked at her badge, I looked at her face, and before I could get the words out, she said, well, I have a different last name now, but my name was Miss Shobe. And I'm like, you were my sister's second grade teacher. And so I go on to tell her about how excited my parents were that my sister had a teacher that was Black. And so I go home and I tell my husband this story. And then my husband looks at me and said, yeah, that was my second grade teacher too. So in case you're wondering how I did not know until I went home who my husband's second grade teacher was, yes, my husband and I went to the same elementary, middle school, and high school, but we did not meet until college. We actually met online at blackplanet.com, an old social networking site for Black people, and we met in person on campus at Purdue University eventually. And at that same time, we happened to be in the same lecture class, agricultural economics, the one class that overlapped between our majors of English education and computer science. So I guess you could say it was in the cards, but my husband was a year ahead of me, so I did not meet him until later. And so that made me talk to my husband about, well, hey, how many Black teachers did you have in school? And so when he was in Lawrence Township, he had 7 Black teachers. I only had 2. And so right now my boys are in second grade and they have yet to have a classroom teacher that is a Black teacher. And so even now as a mother in 2018, I'm wondering, will the day come where both of my boys will have the opportunity to have a Black teacher? And this really goes back to recruitment and retention. We have to start doing something differently to get kids who are in high school to want to go into the teaching profession. Because if you have a crappy experience as a Black student, you probably don't want to go back and work in the school. Now that does motivate some Black educators to go back into the school system because they want to change things up. But some people don't want to become teachers because the system failed them and they just want to get away from the system. And so once we get those educators into colleges, we have to help them get through college because all high schools aren't made equal. Some kids get into college, but they start behind and have to retake classes. And then we have to make sure they pass the test. And then when they get into the school setting, the setting has to be supportive. They have to have mentors. They have to have a principal. They have to have a school leader that's going to back them up and not just see them as a disciplinarian and that's going to support them. And talk to other educators if they're causing them problems in the school building. And so those are some of the things that has to happen continually in so many different places. But it's just not about Black kids. All kids, we know this from research, benefit from having a teacher of color. I student taught in rural Indiana. My first teaching job was in the suburbs. And I remember when I decided, I really want to go back and work in Indianapolis. Some of the parents said to me, I'm so glad that you came here to work and teach because you are the only teacher of color my child's ever had. And you brought a wealth of knowledge and you gave my child a different perspective. And so I may have been the only positive image of a Black person those students have saw. They may have only interacted with Black people through the media. And right now we know in the media, sometimes Black people aren't depicted in the best light. And so it's important in all sects of education that we have educator of color. But I just don't even want to just focus on Black educators. When I think about my K through 12 schooling, I only have 1 Latino educator. And so there's so many other ethnic groups that we need to have more representation of in the classroom. Because when you have a teacher that looks like you, or a teacher from a different background, they're going to look at the curriculum different. One of my black teachers was a history teacher. And so the way he taught history was different than any other history teacher I ever had in school, because he brought in other aspects and he brought in other perspectives. We just wasn't going from cover to cover in the textbook. And so I'm hoping that this starts a conversation of how we get more teachers of color in the classroom, how we retain more teachers of color in the classroom, so black parents like myself aren't hoping that one day their child will get a black teacher, or that, this will never happen, that this is just some goal. Because, my husband and I went to the same school district. He had 7, I had 2, because you just can't stick all the black kids with the black teacher. So some kids, even if there's a black teacher in their school, because there's so few of them, they may not even be in that teacher's classroom. And my last piece I'll leave you with, I'm talking about teachers of color of quality. Because sometimes when we have this conversation, people get confused, like, oh, you just want to put a black person in there. I had 2 black teachers during my K through 12 schooling. The history teacher I liked. My gym teacher I did not like. She was a mean lady and she was a bully. It was actually my gym teacher. She thought I was a weakling, made a point to tell me I was a weakling. Thought that I'm just not a coordinated person. I'm not even gonna lie. But, I was putting the best effort I could out there. And instead of helping me and encouraging me, anytime she had an opportunity, she would just kind of make fun of me. And so I don't think that person was a quality educator, nor do I think that person should be in front of children. So when we're talking about bringing more teachers of color into the profession, we're talking about teachers of color who are of high quality. And we need to keep those teachers in the classroom. So that's what I have for you this time. Until next time.